In our top story, U.S. President Donald Trump will address a joint session of the U.S. Congress shortly in his first such address since taking over as the 47th American president in January. Although this is not a State of the Union address, it is a similarly orchestrated affair full of pomp and ceremony. A lot is expected to be on Trump's agenda for this speech. According to multiple sources, Trump hopes to announce a minerals agreement with Ukraine. He could also lay out his plans to end the Ukraine war and gain the release of hostages held by Hamas militants in Gaza. Now, Reuters reports citing 4 different sources say that the Trump administration and Ukraine plan to sign a minerals deal on Tuesday. The report added that Trump has told his advisors that he wants to announce the agreement in his address to Congress. However, they cautioned that the deal had yet to be signed and the situation can change. According to reports, the U.S. president will also highlight his biggest executive actions in the past 1 month, what the administration has achieved so far, and what Washington further aims to achieve under Donald Trump in the next 4 years. The tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China could also find a mention in his speech. Trump is also expected to use his speech to laud his efforts to slash the size of the federal bureaucracy and reduce the flow of migrants over the U.S.-Mexico border. On the domestic front, Trump is likely to use the speech to make a case for extending his 2017 tax cuts. The First Lady Melania Trump will be joined and addressed by a number of selected guests. These include the family of Corey Comparator, a firefighter who was killed by the gunman who also grazed Trump with a bullet during a campaign rally last July. Now, others include Mark Fogel, a history teacher freed from detention in Russia in February. Now, Trump's advisor, Elon Musk, will also be attending the night speech. Now, responding on behalf of the Democrat is Michigan Senator Elissa Slotkin. The 48-year-old is first-time senator and has been dubbed as the rising star in the blue camp. Now, Slotkin is a former CIA analyst who has served on both political sides under George W. Bush and Barack Obama, respectively. All right, well, for more on this, we are now being joined by our correspondent, Susan Tirani, live from New York. Thank you so much, Susan, for joining us right now. Of course, the preparations are going on for Trump's first address to the Congress. What are we expecting?
Yeah, as you mentioned, this is really going to be a speech that President Trump is going to deliver regarding his first few weeks in office. And as you said, it's not the State of the Union just because such short time has passed since he's assumed the presidency for the second time. He's going to talk about his administration's work so far on the economy, immigration, and foreign policy, and what's ahead regarding those issues. Now, the address also comes as Congress faces a deadline to pass new government funding to pursue a budget bill for the Trump administration's agenda. It also, of course, takes place against the backdrop of these new tariffs on Mexico and Canada, and also the recent spat between the United States and Ukraine last week at the Oval Office, which we saw. Of course, we did see that a long tweet or on X by Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine saying that he is ready for negotiations and that mineral deal that you mentioned as well. We are hearing, of course, that President Trump will have a number of surprise announcements. One of them may be that they have finally reached an agreement to sign that mineral deal with Ukraine. Of course, Ukraine is in a very tough spot right now. The president also is speaking at a time when just recently he stopped the transfer of military aid and weapons to Ukraine, notably those in transit as well. The issue of DOGE, of course, is going to be on the agenda. And not only President Trump is going to try to defend that along with the tariffs, but also the Democrats are targeting DOGE with their sort of opposition in the chamber. They are inviting a number of fired federal workers, which, of course, Elon Musk-led DOGE sort of targeted to cut government spending. So they're going to be in the chamber. We are expecting the Democrats to either walk out. Some of them have decided not to attend, and they also have sort of these props, apparently, to make noise as President Trump is going to be delivering his address.
All right, Susan, I'll come back to you in a moment. But let's also get in our guest now. Lester Amundsen from Washington, D.C. is joining us right now. He's a senior fellow at the National Security Institute and the co-head of the international practice at BGR Group, a leading government relations firm in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us. So first of all, of course, we heard Susan. She underlined, of course, the major topics that we are expected from Donald Trump. Now, this is, of course, he's probably going to be planning out or laying out his radical plans to reshape U.S. government and end the Ukraine war. What are you expecting from his address?
Well, there's been a whirlwind of activity since Donald Trump became president on January 20th, just a month and a half ago. And so I think he's already put out a document publicly that lists, I believe, 47 major accomplishments of his administration. So I expect he's going to talk about what he views as his major accomplishments, which a big chunk of which will include talk about migration issues, halting illegal immigration over the U.S. southern border with Mexico, that kind of thing. I think he'll be talking about some of his foreign policy initiatives. He'll look to explain what he's trying to do with the Ukraine-Russia situation. And I very much hope that he's going to offer something a little more positive than what we saw on Friday about the possibilities going forward. And perhaps, as you noted earlier, President Zelensky will have agreed to this mineral deal, or there'll be some other major announcement related to that. That would certainly be a welcome thing. So he's got a lot to talk about, a lot of different things he could pick and choose from. He's been very busy for the last 7 weeks or so. And I think he's going to try and make a case to the American people that he's doing what they elected him to do. And he has a pretty good basis to assert that. His poll numbers are pretty high, certainly very high by his standards. And so he's going to come into this event with a lot of momentum politically. And I expect he'll get a very warm reception, particularly from the Republican members of Congress.
Right. Yeah, right. Let me go back to Susan now, of course. You also mentioned the federal workers, and we are expecting some federal workers who will be joining the Democrats as guests during the Congress address. You talked about, the props. What else are we hearing about, the federal workers who are joining as guests at the Congress?
So the Democrats decided to allegedly bring these federal workers. They're, of course, upset. They're disgruntled. Some of them have different stories, like being veterans. Some of them, are saying that since they've lost their jobs, they had a very hard time trying to really, find new jobs and adapt to their new situation. So, that's something that the Democrats want to really hone in on. Of course, it's the issue of the economy. Whether or not we've heard that they might sort of bring props regarding high egg prices. We'll have to wait and see if it's egg cartons or anything of that sort. And also, just general props to sort of kind of disrupt what the president is saying. Although there have been some Democrat lawmakers who have asked them to not do that while the president is speaking because it may be counterproductive. Others, notably the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, which it's a large number at this point on Capitol Hill. They want to get their voices heard one way or the other and show their opposition.
Right. Let me go back to our guest now. Now, this address also comes as U.S. has paused Ukraine aid. What kind of address do you think we will see on that part? Well, Zelensky has clearly said he regrets his encounter with Trump.
Well, I think President Trump is going to have to be very careful here. There are a lot of supporters, particularly among Senate Republicans of Ukraine and supporters of Zelensky. And I think many of those senators were very concerned about the way things turned out on Friday. So President Trump needs to address those concerns, account for them, and pivot to a way forward on negotiations with Russia that he's arranging for Ukraine. So he's got a pretty good platform here. He's got the whole world watching. He can outline the steps he's taken in the last few days. Hopefully there's been some rapprochement with President Zelensky and he can give a positive message. If he can't give a positive message on Ukraine, then I think we might see some grumbling after the speech from some Republican senators, maybe even a few in the House, who are a little upset about the way things are going. But let's remember, overall, President Trump remains very popular. His political position is very strong. There are very few people in his party who are willing to challenge him on this or any other issue.
Right, and of course, also, what about on tariffs? Because I'm sure he's going to be addressing that. What are the, if I may ask, Americans expecting from that arrest?
Well, President Trump has been on kind of a tariff binge of late, announcing new tariffs on China, Canada, and Mexico. The U.S. stock market has responded in a very negative way. The stock market's lost 5 to 7% of its value just in the last few days. So that's a real kind of vote by the market against these tariffs. We're hearing some messages today that the administration may be backing off on some of the tariffs with Canada and Mexico. So that might be good news on the free trade front. But that's a potential thorny issue for the president. We'll see if he addresses it in the speech tonight. He may save that for a more mechanical announcement tomorrow. I don't know. But that is an issue where he does have some vulnerability.
Right. Let me go back to Susan. Susan, I'm guessing, of course, West Asia will also be addressed. What are we expecting on that front?
Yeah, President Trump is definitely going to talk about West Asia or the Middle East, and we are expected to really hear strong words against groups like Hamas, perhaps Iran as well, and America's full-fledged support for Israel and what it's doing in the region. As you mentioned, foreign policy really is going to be a cornerstone, and we expect not only the issue of Ukraine and Russia, China, of course, to an extent, but also the issue of Middle East and what's happening there is going to be on top of the agenda. And I think that's going to be something that a lot of people are going to want to hear from the president on how to move forward on that, considering the fact that, the headlines have been captured by Ukraine in the last few days, at least.
Right. An address, of course, I'm of course expecting the Russia and of course China and Mexico. All these countries will be looking forward to as well. But thank you so much, Susan, and thank you so much our guest, Ellen Sturmanson, for joining us and giving all the updates.
Thank you.